for that riveting welcome, Kevin. It's all right to laugh, folks. Trying to have a good time tonight. I'm Jerry Weaver. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July the 2nd, 1989. My home group is a group called There Is a Solution. We meet in Holly Springs Tuesday night, Thursday night, 7 p.m. at the Methodist Church. Good group of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're ever in that area, it's not that far from here, come check us out. Good to be sober tonight. Good to be in my right mind. Good to be amongst friends. Good to see some folks I haven't seen in a little while. Now, I don't know if anybody knows this, but I was asked to talk on living the traditions. So, or living the traditions in your personal life. So you got time to get out of here and get to another meeting. I mean, you'll be a little late, but if they do a bunch of readings, you probably got time to get there before they start the discussion. And the person who asked me to speak's not even here. I don't know where. What happened to Katie? Is she out of town?
They're in Maryland.
Oh, okay. She didn't tell me. I want to, I guess, congratulate y'all for starting a new group. I know that it's not easy to do that, and it takes a lot of work and takes a lot of footwork, and so hopefully the group will make it. Obviously, from the crowd, it looks like that you will, but I know that it takes a lot of work. So I commend you on doing that. It's not an easy task. So I'm a guy that I started drinking when I was 12, and when I first just think about tradition, a couple of things come to mind. One is unity, the importance of unity, and people staying together and being together and trying to help one another, and I think about self-sacrifice. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. That's good there. I think about self-sacrifice. And I can tell you, when I started drinking at 12, I knew nothing about unity, and I knew nothing about self-sacrifice. What I knew about was being scared and petrified and not realizing that's what was wrong with me. And I was very in tune with being what I would later learn was selfishness and self-centeredness, in that I wanted what I wanted, and I wanted people to do what I wanted them to do, and I wanted things to go my way all the time. And when they didn't, I'd get mad and act like a little kid. And when I started drinking, I mean, I definitely didn't care anything about unity. At the age of 12, when I got alcohol in me, my life changed. Meaning all that fear and all that doubt and confusion went away, and I had a spiritual transformation when I ingested alcohol. All those feelings and thoughts that I had about not being enough and not measuring up disappeared, and alcohol gave me power. It helped me to think different, it helped me to feel different, it helped me to do things that I couldn't do when I wasn't drinking. And it was just the greatest thing in the world. I mean, I was a guy that just took to it like a fish to water. And when I started, I didn't slow down much. I mean, every opportunity I got as a young teenager to drink, I drank. I created opportunities to drink. I stole alcohol from my parents, from other kids' parents. I'd shoplift alcohol. I would do whatever I had to do to get it, and I got into a lot of trouble. Now, I'm a guy, I'll get in trouble with drinking and not drinking. I'm not one of those folks that got in trouble just when I drank. Most of the damn trouble I got into, I was sober. But I was just a chaotic, rebellious guy, and my parents didn't really know what to do with me, and they would have meetings and talk about putting me in military school, and I'd get in trouble with the law, and the law would be wanting to put me in juvenile detention centers or reform schools, and my dad kept me out of all that stuff. Looking back on it, I'm grateful that he did. And I was just a guy searching for an answer to all that noise in my head and all that emptiness that I had inside, and alcohol did that. And basically what happened was I went into the Air Force. I got in a bunch of trouble with the law in Harnett County. I got out of the trouble in exchange for going into the military. I went into the Air Force at age 18 thinking my life was just automatically going to get better. That's not what happened. I started to drink, started to black out. I'd wake up and not remember what happened the night before. People had to tell me what I did. I'd wake up in other people's bed. I'd wake up with other people's clothes on. I woke up one time with some women's clothes on. And, I couldn't remember what happened the night before. And I just thought that was kind of normal. I thought that happened to a lot of people. And I got married around that same time, thinking that getting married was going to teach me some responsibility. And that didn't happen. I was a bad husband. And what happened was alcohol, somewhere around 19, 20 years old, I believe I developed alcoholism, meaning that when I started drinking, I couldn't stop and I couldn't predict what I was going to do. And alcohol just became the most important thing in my life. And I would get to the point to where I'd try to quit because of what I was doing to my family and not being able to be responsible in a lot of areas of my life. And I couldn't quit. The best I could do, excuse me, man, we had some Mexican, and it's coming back up right before the meeting. Yeah, I just couldn't. I couldn't put more than 2 or 3 days together of not drinking. That led to trying to get sober in church, trying to get sober through a psychiatrist, trying to get sober through exercise, trying to get sober through eating right, trying to get sober through looking good, and shaved my head one time thinking that was going to keep me sober. And no matter what I tried, I couldn't stay sober, and I got suicidal. I attempted suicide 3 times. I don't know. They tell me that I died twice. I remember one of them. I had this dog that had mange, and the vet had given me this poison to kill mange on the dog. And I shot some of it up my arm one night trying to kill myself, and that tells you I'm not dealing with a full deck, for sure. And I was in the hospital after that for 5 days. Got out of the hospital, knew that I was never going to drink again after going through that experience. 3 days out of the hospital, I talked myself into drinking, justified it by if I just bought an 8-ounce beer instead of the 12 or the 16 ounce and ate a Slim Jim before, it would be different. So I stopped at the Quick Stop there in Anderson Creek and bought me a Slim Jim and an 8-pack of Budweiser Ponies. And that was 8 days after being away from committing suicide and basically destroying my family, devastating my parents. And that thought never entered my mind about the destruction I had caused people and even caused myself. That's that insanity of the first drink that they talk about in our book, that I had no effective mental defense against that. That once it hit me, I was going to take that first drink. And once I take the first one, it sets off that allergy or that compulsion, and then I'm off to the races, and that's what happened. I ate that Slim Jim and drank them 8-pack of Budweisers, and I was gone, and it set off this cycle again, and that was just a story of my life. Just one just crazy episode after another. I got discharged out of the Air Force, started living like an animal, and one morning I was walking down the road between Benson and Coates, with absolutely no plan to get sober, no plan to get my life in order. My plan was to go to the IGA and write a bad check, and then stop back by the bootleggers and go back to this guy's house named Wayne. And something happened to me when I was walking down the road that morning. It was like my whole life flashed before my eyes. Now it was not a spiritual experience in the sense that, like one of our co-founders had, Bill Wilson. It was nothing like this. Is all hindsight. But I do remember this happened when I was walking down the road. It was like I started hearing these voices, and this like moment of clarity came to me, and that said that, man, you need to get your life in order. You Now, that had happened before. That wasn't the first time that someone told me that. But this was a little different looking back on it, and it was like I wanted to die, I didn't want to die. I wanted to drink, I didn't want to drink. I think our book calls that the jumping off place, and that's really where I was at. Didn't know it. And I just uttered a couple of prayers out loud. I said, there's got to be something better than this, and I said, God, please help me. And all I can tell you is I've been sober ever since. And I didn't get struck sober. Through a series of, I guess, coincidences that morning, I ended up in a detox with no knowledge of what my problem was. I didn't know anything about alcoholism. I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know anything about 12 steps. All I knew was that I needed some help. And it was kind of the first real time that I honestly just knew that, hey, I need some help. I think all those other times I was trying to get better, I was just more complying with some of the conditions in my life so I could get out of trouble. But there was no surrender. And that morning, I was surrendered. I didn't make it happen. It just kind of happened. And I really can't explain it. But I know that something happened and that my life started going down a different path. And it's funny. So I ended up in a detox, and a guy from Alcoholics Anonymous came in and talked to me. I identified with what he said. It was the first time I'd heard anybody talk like that. And through that identification and him sharing the language of the heart, I was able to connect to something different than what I'd been introduced to in all those other places where those folks tried to help me, but there was no identification. And funny thing about the traditions, the very first meeting I ever went to I was in that detox, and I don't think it was the first night. It was the second or the third night before they kicked me out. I went to this meeting. I know now it was an NA meeting, okay? Because this guy walked in and he had these colored key tags all down his pants legs. I know now there's those keychains that they collect. And he had all these colors and then these glow-in-the-dark ones. But he had them hooked to the side of his leg. And anyway, I'm sitting there, and this guy, the guy chairing the meeting, gives me something to read. Now, I'm barely alive. And he throws this thing down and gives me something to read. And the only reason I remember this is, I'll tell you in a second why I remember it, because I started looking at it. And man, I'm petrified. And I'm like, I can't believe this guy wants me to read something. I had no idea where I was at. And I start looking at it. I start rehearsing because I want to make sure I don't make any mistakes. And down to the last two, there was this word, anonymity. I had never seen that word in my life. And I was like, and for some reason, I had enough courage to ask him. I said, what's this word right here? And he said, anonymity. I said, oh yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, I didn't want him to know I didn't know. And I read those traditions, and I got down to number 11. I said, anominani. I couldn't say it. So that was my first introduction to traditions. The only reason I remember that is because I remember asking that guy how to pronounce it. Now, the other thing that happened, and I'm going to get to traditions here in a second. The other thing that happened in that meeting was, you've heard this before if you've been to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, that they'll say if you hang out long enough, you'll hear somebody tell you a story. Well, that happened to me at that first NA meeting, because this place that I was at, they also had an adolescent unit, and they had like this mental health stuff for all kinds of different addicts and stuff. So I guess a lot of those folks were at that meeting, and the guy opens the meeting up, and this dude over here in this one chair raises his hand, and he says, I need to say something. The guy says, well, okay. And he's like, he says, all I can think about, and I'm not making this up now, and hopefully it's not, it used to not be inappropriate to talk like this, it might be nowadays. He says, all I think about is sex. And I'm like, I ain't thought about that in months. It's like, all I think about is sex, and he's like, I've been in here before, so I've been in here before, and I get out, and I immediately, go back to calling people and hooking up with people, and that's all I think about before I go to sleep. And when I wake up, and I'm listening to this guy, and I'm like, man, he's telling my story. He's like, and then I'm like, he got done, and people just kind of looked at him and like, yeah, okay. And I was like, I didn't even know what was going on, but that was my first experience with all that. Luckily, I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous pretty quickly after that. So what happened to me was I started coming to Alcoholics Anonymous eventually, and my life started to change. I gave my life to Alcoholics Anonymous. I went all in on Alcoholics Anonymous. I've never regretted it. I'm a guy that's been active ever since I got here. I've been sober ever since I got here. I have tried to participate as best as I can ever since I've got here. And I don't say that to impress anybody. I say that because nobody says it anymore. It's like it's cool if you don't do Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's cool if you goof off in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's cool if you disappear for a little while. And all I've seen is thousands of people get drunk and die. It used to say hundreds, but I've been sober long enough now, it's actually thousands. And what I can tell you is that Alcoholics Anonymous can be permanent. You ain't got to drink again. There ain't got to be no stupid revolving door like they talk about. You can actually stay here and be sober. That's been my experience, is that I've had permanent recovery. And so what happened, I took the steps. And when I took those first 9 steps, what happened to me was that I became unified with God, and I became unified with my fellow man. And all those people that I had hurt, and all those people that I thought I would never have a relationship with, and all those people that I thought had written me off, because of the first 9 steps of our program, I was able to reconcile all that. And I was able to start having deep, meaningful relationships with people. I was able to start having a relationship with a loving God, a God that I wasn't afraid of anymore. The steps gave me that. So the question is, well, how do you continue that? Well, we got, that Mexican is coming on up. I apologize. We've got steps 10 and 11 and 12 that help us maintain and help us grow. On the 12th step, it talks about practicing principles practicing principle in all our affairs. So the question is, how do you do that? I would submit to you, one of the ways that I've been taught to do that in Alcoholics Anonymous by people that have been sober a long time is by trying to apply the traditions in my life. That those are 12 more sets of principles that I can practice as a way of life that help me to continue to foster good relationships with people. They help me to get along in society and to actually prosper and stay sober. Now, I'm also a guy that originally was taught that the traditions are just for the group. No, I shouldn't say I was taught that. That's what I heard. Yeah. Right? The traditions are just for the group. They're about politics and bureaucracy, and that's absolutely not true. The traditions are just as good for an individual as they are for the group. And I think one of the things that, for me, that I had to ask myself a long time ago was, you can get whatever you want in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want just to be sober and that's it, you can get that. If you want a girlfriend or a boyfriend and a car, you can get that. If you want to just come in here and get you some coffee and a little bit of fellowship, you can get that. If you want to come in here and get sober and be free and be transformed and have a completely new way of life, you can get that. And the question that I had to ask myself somewhere around 5 years sober was, am I really serious about this? And am I really going to start applying this in every area of my life? Do I really want to be a kind of a unifying spirit in my family, a unifier at work? Do I really want to be a peacemaker or a peacekeeper? Right? Do I really want to try to practice love and tolerance? According to the 10th step, that's our code. Right? It says it in the 10th step in the book that love and tolerance is our code. Well, do I really want to do that, or is it just something that I want to talk about? For a little while, it was just something I wanted to talk about. And then I realized that maybe I actually should start applying that in my life. Do I really want to get rid of pride and selfishness and try to be unselfish? Do I really want to have a life of inclusion and include people in my life instead of excluding people and acting out on prejudice like I was kind of brought up on? And the third tradition taught me to get rid of that stuff. So those were questions that I had to ask myself. And, you know, when I kind of decided that, yeah, I wanted to do that, then that's where, for me, that's where the traditions came in. Now, I'm a guy who always thought that the fifth tradition should be the first tradition. Now, I'm not suggesting we rewrite them. Please don't say that. But the fifth tradition talks about a group purpose, right? Our group purpose is to help other alcoholics. Well, as an individual, right, it would help me to have a purpose, right? I mean, obviously my purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics, but it can be deeper than that. It could have more meaning than that. And for me, if I can identify what my purpose is and start living towards that, then the rest of those traditions kind of help me go towards that goal. My purpose is, actually I took it from the 12th step out of the 12 and 12. It says to live humbly and usefully under the grace of God, putting the needs of others ahead of my own. So that's something that, for me, I learned that from the fifth tradition of just trying to have a purpose of, hey, what do I want my life to be about? Because when I was out there drinking, all I was worried about was myself. Now, I masked it pretty good by trying to be nice and kind to people. But in the long run, all I was trying to manipulate people to get something out of it. And then when that didn't work, I'd get mad and angry and be indignant, and then I'd start getting full of self-pity. And one of the things that the steps did for me was they helped me to kind of get rid of that. I think that the traditions are all about losing fear and self-will. And do I really want to have complete faith and trust in a loving God instead of myself? In the first tradition talks about our common welfare comes first. That means that all of y'all's welfare should be ahead of mine. Right? If I'm really going to believe what that first tradition says, that means that whatever group I'm a part of or wherever I'm at, that whatever's best for the group is ultimately what's best for me. But see, I think I'm pretty smart. And although I've never seen anybody else that try to kill himself with mange poison, I'm probably not as smart as some of you guys are. But I always think my ideas are better. And I always think, man, if you guys could just get on board with what I'm putting down, everything's going to be all right for everybody. And I think the story in the book Before the Third Step, where it talks about the actor trying to be the director, right? He's trying to run the show, and he's trying to be an orchestrator or a director and get everybody. That kind of thinking's got to go for me if I'm going to practice that first tradition. That really what I should start thinking about is, hey, what can I do to help you? What can I do to help my wife? What can I do to help my nieces and nephews? What can I do to help my mom and my dad? And start thinking less of myself, trying to get rid of that selfishness and self-centeredness. And ultimately, what I have found, just through experiences, is that when I try to get out of myself and help other people, and I do what's best for my family, or if I'm at work and I'll lay aside what I think is the greatest idea in the world and get consensus with a group of people, and we all agree upon something and then move towards that always ends up being better than whatever I think of. That there's power in numbers, and power with people is way better than power over people. and that the combined experience of multiple people is way wiser than me. And that's what I gotta try to remember. Number 2 talks about a loving God. So just two things on tradition too. It talks about a group conscience, and it talks about a loving God expressing himself through a group conscience. So if I'm going to actually listen for the conscience of a group, I got to listen. And I'm the worst listener in the world. Not anymore, but when I got here, I didn't listen to anybody. I thought I knew it all, and even when I didn't, I'd act like I did. I wasn't going to ask anybody any questions because I don't want anybody to know that I don't know the answers. And one of the things I learned in the second tradition is to learn how to listen. There's a prayer in the 12 and 12 that what's that guy's name? Saint Francis. Yeah. Saint Francis. It says, seek first to understand and to be understood. Those are good words to live by. Those are really good words for the second tradition. Because I get so caught up in my idea. I get so caught up in who's right and who's wrong, and I'm always the one that's right, that I can't hear anybody. I don't listen to anything. And I can't hear the wisdom of somebody else or the wisdom of of what we call in Alcoholics Anonymous the minority opinion. Right? There's a lot of times there's wisdom and there's really good ideas in the minority opinion, and if I'm not listening, then I can't hear it. And I've also learned here that I got to be willing to change my mind and my point of view if I get better information or new information. And that wasn't something that I did prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. The other thing it tells me is that I should trust in a loving God. And I think that this kind of goes back to some of those original questions that I had to ask myself. Do I really believe in a loving God? Or do I just give it lip service? Am I really going to lose all attachments to material things and people and other things and actually trust in God? Am I going to use a loving God to guide my decisions and to guide my thoughts? Or is that just something that I talk about in the meeting and go out to the house or go out in the car and start flipping people off and running them off the road and go home? I've done all that, by the way. But at some point, I got to get over that. I've also learned in tradition too that, and a lot of this is through business meetings, is that it's okay to disagree with people and actually still be their friend. I mean, I didn't know that was an option before I got here. I mean, if we disagreed, then I would just write you off, right? And I've learned that it's okay to have disagreements with people and still be friends with them. Actually, to be civil. I learned that in tradition too. And I've learned that there's a lot of wise counsel if I can listen to people. By the way, I'm just looking at the long form in the big book here. A lot of people don't know that the traditions are actually in the book. They used to say a lot of times if you wanted to hide something from an alcoholic, put it in the book. Right? We should bring that back because you don't hear it much anymore, do you, Phil? 3 talks about membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? Alcoholics Anonymous will welcome anybody. Right? And you can be a member when you say you are, assuming you got a problem with alcohol. So, I mean, this is one of my favorite ones, and personally because Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't have any prejudice. AA will welcome anybody. Now, you might go to certain groups and not feel welcome. That's not Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a few individuals that aren't practicing principles. AA gets blamed for a lot of stuff that people do. But Alcoholics Anonymous will welcome anybody. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't care who you are, what you look like, what your lifestyle is. It doesn't matter. And so I've learned through the third tradition that maybe I should try to lay aside old ideas maybe I should try to lay aside old prejudices towards certain people. Maybe I should not be so cut off and closed-minded towards how certain people look. And that in Alcoholics Anonymous, what that means is I should try to help anybody. Right? That if you come here and you want help, I should try to help you. It's helped me to look at people, all people as God's kids. We're all God's kids. We're all the children of a loving Creator, if I believe that. And so if I've gotten sober and I've been given a new way to live, then my job should be to pass that on to other people. I've learned this in my family. That some of y'all have heard this before, but I mean, we've got in my family. We've got a lot of younger generations that are dating people that the older generation didn't date, or they're marrying people that of different nationalities or different skin colors, and a lot of folks in my family don't like that, and they'll start talking about it, or they'll start having these inappropriate conversations about it. I don't participate in that. I won't participate in it. I try to support my nieces or nephews or cousins or whoever's doing that. I've learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous. That my job is just to try to be helpful and not to pass judgment or to put demands on people and things like that. I learned that through the third tradition. Time is slipping away there, Tom. Oh, we'll go to 10? Okay. No. 4 talks about autonomy, right? A group is basically not responsible for anything other than its own group conscience. So basically an AA group can do about what it wants to do, unless it's going to do something that's going to harm Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole or another group. So Alcoholics Anonymous gives a lot of flexibility to groups to do what you want to do. And with that, personally, I've learned that I should probably give a lot of flexibility to other people to do what they want to do and have their own experience. But I'm a guy that likes to tell you about my experience and how you can avoid things and how you can have a better life if you would just do this. And in the 4th tradition, I've learned personally to let people have their own experience. If you ask me some help, I'll help you. If you ask me for an opinion, I'll give it to you. But I should probably keep it to myself unless you ask. Yeah. And it's okay to let people have their own experience. The other thing for me, and this is another one that I think personally that is probably one of the most powerful and the most, I guess, easy to understand, is the 4th tradition says, hey, group, do what you want to do unless your actions are going to hurt somebody else. You should talk to them first. So personally, that's what I mean, before I never talked to anybody about anything. If I wanted to do something, I just went and did it. And if it impacted you or hurt you or somehow, that was your problem, not mine. And the 4th tradition has taught me that if I'm going to make a decision that's going to impact my family, or if I'm going to make a decision that's going to impact other people, if I'm going to make a decision that impacts people that I work with, I probably ought to talk to them about it first. I probably ought to get their buy-in before I do it. Yeah. Like if I say this a lot, if I was going to go buy a Porsche tomorrow, I probably should ask my wife about it before I just went out and did it. I still think it's a good idea, Nettie, to just go do it. But yeah. At work, when I used to work for a corporation, I was in positions of authority, and I could make decisions on a lot of stuff. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous and because of traditions and trying to apply those at work, I was a guy that almost, sometimes you just got to make a decision and people got to deal with it, but I was a guy that always tried to get buy-in from people, and I always talked to folks that were going to be impacted. by those decisions. If we were going to do something crazy with a promotion or something crazy with pay for people and commissions and things like that, we would always, and a lot of accountants and attorneys just want to make decisions, but I would always run it by the people that it was going to impact before we did it. And a person that will do that will gain a lot of respect from folks. And you'll get information that'll help you run a business. One of my favorites is 6. So 6 talks about problems of money, property, and prestige diverting us from our primary spiritual aim, if you look at the long form. And so again, this is another one that, for me, well, I think it's the reason people relapse in Alcoholics Anonymous. If we pick it apart, it talks about letting money, property, prestige get in the way of our spiritual aim. Meaning that we get sober, like I said earlier, you can get anything in Alcoholics Anonymous you want. But typically, most people, if they come and they stay a little while and start doing the deal, their lives change. Right? I mean, it happened to me. I got a job. I got a vehicle. I started making a little bit of money. Several months went by, my wife came back, and all that stuff all of a sudden becomes real important, right? And I forget that I had none of it 9 months before that. Yeah, but now I got it all back, and that stuff becomes more important than giving the guy a ride to the meeting. It becomes more important than praying in the morning. It becomes more important than showing up at the home group. It becomes more important than reading literature. It becomes more important than calling my sponsor. And so I let the job and the relationship get in the way of me growing spiritually. And what happens to me if I stop growing spiritually, my mind starts playing with games with me. The obsession starts coming back that maybe it'd be okay to take a drink. And the next thing I know, the defense against the first drink is gone. And I'm taking that first drink and I'm off to the races. And I believe it's because it ties right into the 6th tradition, right? The 6th tradition tells Alcoholics Anonymous to not let property, money, and authority and prestige get in its way of helping alcoholics. I can't let that stuff get in the way of me growing spiritually and carrying out my purpose. And if I do it long enough, I'm eventually going to drink. So it's important for me to there's a slogan in Alcoholics Anonymous, first things first. That has a lot of different meanings in it. But personally, it ties into this 6th tradition in that I got to do certain things in order to maintain my sobriety and to maintain my conscious contact with God. And I shouldn't let anything interfere with that. I shouldn't let anything jeopardize those values and those principles that I've established. So I'm going to make sure I pray and meditate in the morning. I'm going to make sure I talk to some folks in the program every day. I'm going to read literature, and I'm going to try to help somebody. And I'm going to show up at my home group and any commitments that I make. And it's very, 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 very important. The life that we're given in Alcoholics Anonymous is the very thing that can take us away. It also talks about in 6 that AA shouldn't bind itself to anyone. Meaning that AA doesn't give its name to other organizations and things like that, and we're not tied to anything. We don't own any property and stuff like that. That's another thing for me personally, is that I ought to try to be careful what I attach myself to. And I ought to make sure that I'm not completely attached to a house or a material thing or a car or image and looking good. It's easy to get caught up in all that stuff and think that you got to have the house or the car in order to be whole and in order to be complete. And my attachment should be on a loving God, nothing else. All that other stuff can come and go. I can tell you from personal experience. I don't care how good you think you are today, it can all go tomorrow. I've been rich and broke in the same day, more than once. figure that out. It ain't a good situation. I'm back in good shape right now, but none of that stuff matters. 7 talks about self-support. Again, another one. I mean, I don't know, a lot of us were not self-supporting when we got here. I was a guy that mooched off of people. I thought people ought to pay my way. I used and abused my parents. I used and abused my father-in-law. I mean, I expected them just to take care of me. I expected them to do stuff for me. I've said this a bunch of times. I think it's funny. We talk about millennials and how they're entitled. They ain't got no corner on that. I was doing it long before they were born. I mean, I was entitled a long time ago, and just thought that people should do stuff for me. And the sad part about it is most of them kept doing stuff for me. And when I got sober, I was taught that I had to stop that. That you got to stop living off of other people, and you got to start standing on your own 2 feet and trying to take care of yourself if you can. And that's what I was taught, was that I needed to start putting money in the basket. I needed to start paying my bills. I needed to go make amends for stuff that I owed money for. I didn't need to hide from that stuff. And I learned that through good sponsorship. It also helped me to understand the importance of being responsible with money and not living above my means, and actually living below my means, so I'm not fearful and don't have a whole lot of stress. And it took me a while to actually get to that point, but the 7th tradition really taught me how to do that. Right? It taught me how to have a healthy relationship with money, if you will, and not to be afraid of it, or afraid of having it, or afraid of not having it, because I've had both. But I've learned to pay my own way in Alcoholics Anonymous, and not to be entitled. And I've learned, I guess you could call it some kind of I don't know if you'd call it an amends. Maybe it's just being responsible. But I mean, I had so many people taking care of me that I've learned today to be helpful to other people. Right? I've learned to give freely of what I got, if I can. And I'm not afraid to do that anymore. And my experience has been the more helpful I am, and the more I with the right motive, try to help people financially, it always comes back to me. Always. There's a spiritual principle there that kind of doesn't get broken. So on number 8, I think for me personally, what that, it says that we don't have any paid workers, that we do what we do here for free and for fun. And we don't profit from it financially by helping other alcoholics. And Alcoholics Anonymous membership is full of all kinds of talented people. When we get sober, right, there's all kinds of people in this room that can do it. We could probably, just the combined experience of people in this room, we could probably do anything. We could probably go build a little city if we wanted to. What 8 has taught me is that I've been given some gifts and some abilities, and that I should give back to my community without charging or thinking that I need any kind of profit, right? So Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the ability to support some other causes in the community, and to give of my time and my resources and my talents for free. For several years I taught a junior achievement class in the Wake County Public School System, just teaching kids about capitalism and how to, different kind of how to manufacture stuff and sell stuff and different economic stuff. I did that for free. I was just giving back to the community. That's really part of it, of practicing number 8 in your personal life. Running low on time here. I'm coming down the home stretch. Don't worry. We got time for cake and milkshake somewhere. On number 9, it talks about having the least possible organization. The A is not organized. Now, you know that's actually not true. We're really organized. I mean, we have meetings and all kinds of stuff, so people show up and honor commitments. And they show up and do a lot of work. We're not organized in the sense that we've got, you know, a president and a hierarchy that can tell us what to do. There's no one person really has any authority over anybody here, and that's a good thing. And so really that's kind of personally what it's taught me is that I shouldn't try to have any authority over people. That I really should try to practice love and tolerance of others, and that I should try to get along with people. That I should try not to sweat the small stuff. That, you know, that I should focus on what's most important and not worry about other things. It also talks about, you know, leadership and trusted servants. It's an interesting concept, being a trusted servant, because prior to getting sober, I mean, you couldn't trust me to do anything. I mean, well, you could trust me to rip you off, or trust me to do something inappropriate to your wife, stuff like that. But you couldn't trust me to do anything responsible and good. And the ninth tradition has taught me that to try to be a trusted servant, to try to honor a commitment, to try to do what I say I'm going to do, to try to be consistent. I still believe one of the most spiritual things that an alcoholic can do is to be consistent and actually show up where you say you're going to show up, and honor commitments. Because I never honored a commitment before coming here. But I learned how to do that in Alcoholics Anonymous by watching other members of Alcoholics Anonymous do it. Right? And another good thing about AA is we get to pick our leaders, and we get to learn from some really good people. I mean, there's no matter what your problem is, there's somebody here tonight that can help you with it. There's somebody here tonight that's been through the exact same thing, and I should try to make use of that. 10 is a good one. For now, I guess nowadays, it talks about not having an opinion on outside controversial issues. We could talk all night on that one, but what it's taught me is that, I mean, of course, I've got opinions personally on stuff, but that when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, and especially in here, that I should leave those outside, and I'm here to help an alcoholic. And I can help you, and you can help me, regardless of what religion you are, political persuasion, or how much money you have or don't have. That what we share here is the language of the heart. And if I'm going to let one of those what the book calls an outside issue, politics, alcohol reform, sectarian religion, if I'm going to let one of those get in the way of me helping you, or better yet, let one of those get in the way of you helping me, then I've missed the whole point of our program. And it's funny because I won't dwell on this long, but I literally know people that were sponsored by somebody for decades and never knew their political persuasion until 3 years ago. And then they fired them just because they found out who they voted for. And it's just strange to me, and I know that's all opinion, but that's just strange to me that would happen in Alcoholics Anonymous. That we can help one another regardless of that. And you know what it's taught me is that for me to pick my battles, and to believe that the truth is the truth and it doesn't need to be defended, and the truth always comes to light, that I don't have to argue it or debate it in here. And that I personally try to avoid serious controversy because I want to help people. I don't care what you look like or who you sleep with or who you're married to. I really don't. I want to help people. And I want us to just try to get along and to see what we can do to help other folks. But I can't do that if I'm constantly picking fights with you over certain things. I can't do that if I'm antagonistic and well, I won't use that word. So civility is important, and I think it ties into number 10. 11 and 12 talk about anonymity. I'll close on this. The 11 talks about there's no need to praise ourselves. It's one of my favorite statements in the book or in the traditions. That it talks about trying to practice a genuine humility. And I'm a guy that likes to be given awards and accolades and attaboys, and I want you to give me an award just for showing up for work on time. And I mean, alcoholic is probably one of the only people on the earth that wants to be given special recognition for just stuff we should be doing all along, right? And 11 tells me to try to avoid that. That I know this isn't everybody's experience, but I worked in the corporate world for 24 years and was just very successful. And I never once asked for a raise or a promotion. I mean, I know nowadays they're teaching people that you got to do that, but I just let my work speak for me. And I didn't try to be boastful about it. I didn't try to make sure that people saw me. And I never did without. And it was one of those things where my actions and the results that I got by practicing these principles spoke for me. I didn't have to do it. And now I work my butt off. But I didn't have to go out and start telling everybody that I was doing. I didn't have to demand anything or ask for stuff. That stuff came because I took action and I had faith. And the problem with me for a long time was I didn't have faith, and I thought, man, I got to do this, I got to do that. And no, I don't have to do anything. All I got to do is take the actions and leave the results up to that loving God that I'm supposed to be having faith in. And finally, 12 talks about. So, the other thing I'll say is that I don't need to be posting my chips on Facebook. I mean, that's just, social media is now a public platform, and anonymity talks about being anonymous at the public level. So I should probably not tell everybody how grateful I am for the chip that I picked up tonight, and actually post it on Facebook, or have it like this in my hand with my picture here, and that's not in the spirit of the tradition. I mean, I understand people want to celebrate and things like that, but I don't have to do it. And then 12 talks about putting principles before personalities. And I'm a guy who always thought that meant I was supposed to put principles before your personalities. Actually, what I've been taught is there's nothing wrong with your personality. There's a lot wrong with mine. And you don't believe that one, do you, Steve? That I'm supposed to practice principles before your personality. I mean, before my personality. That I'm supposed to practice love and tolerance. There's nothing wrong with anybody else. There's a lot wrong with me. Now, there is a lot wrong with y'all, but I can't look at it that way. Right? I gotta look at myself. And I'll just finish up with this. Before I got sober, I mean, I didn't have anything. Right? I was walking the streets, basically homeless and with nothing. And I couldn't stay sober. I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I start doing what people ask me to do, and my life starts to change. And I start being transformed into a different person. And what the tradition 12 tells me is that I should be grateful for that and realize that came from a loving God and from the program. and not me. And that I should constantly be thankful for that and realize that I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. That there's a spiritual transformation and process that happens here when I submit and give and just give up. And that my job, my gratitude for that is trying to help somebody else and trying to pass this on to others. And that's what my job is to do. It's not to go out here and brag and boast about all the good things that have happened to me, and to try to set an example. And I've been given great examples of how to live by watching people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and all I got to do is basically emulate that. I'm giving a good life. So I appreciate y'all listening to me, and I hope you have a good evening. Thanks.